Love and light, everyone. Thank you for being here today and sharing my messages. I've been in practice for over 30 years working with altered states of consciousness, and my resume is on my website. With this film, I'm going to explain to you the way I work and what I've learned through my journey working with hundreds of clients and spirits, because sometimes spirits need help as well. The following short film, The Kola Superdeep Borehole and Hell Explained, I hope will explain some of the experiences from hell by renowned people. The Kola Superdeep Borehole and Hell Explained. In this film, I'm going to explain how the deceased may survive within the torments of hell. We have three bodies. The physical body, we all know what this is. The spiritual body, most of us know what this is. And the etheric body, not many people understand what this is. The etheric body is part material and part spiritual. It's a very fine substance, and that's so fine that it can pass through solid walls. It takes 3 days to dissipate after death, and this is why our nails and hair still grow for 3 days when the spirit has left the material body. The etheric body can stretch. It is a substance without intellect, which is reactive to circumstance. People who have worked their way into hell enter their spirit and etheric bodies. The etheric body brings a capacity to feel material substance. In the same way, earthbound spirits will attach to an individual to fulfill their material desires, such as an alcoholic spirit may enter the fragmented portal of a living alcoholic individual. For more information, please see my film Teachings by Colin DeMay, a description of our three bodies and how they interact, the spiritual, etheric and material bodies. The Kola Superdeep Borehole is one example of human contact with hell, which I believe is Cousteau, the famous sea diver and underwater explorer. He stopped scuba diving after hearing sounds of human screaming on one of the underwater caves he was exploring. Also, one of his men also heard the frightening sounds of human screams deep in the trench of the Bermuda Triangle. The Earth's crust on land is normally 50 miles thick. You have to go down 50 miles before the edge of the fire. But in parts of the ocean floor, the Earth's crust is less than a mile thick. Scientists recently discovered cracks on the ocean floor where fire was leaking out. They found around these fire-breathing vents in the crust giant tube worms measuring up to 8 feet in length. These worms are only found near deep sea vents. Jesus tells us in Mark 9:47, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not extinguished. Another witness to hell was Tachypsychia, reformer, physician and scholar, professor of medicine at the University of Wittenberg, 1525 to 1602. Casper said, out of the bottomless abyss of the fell volcano, or rather out of hell itself, rise melancholy cries and loud wailings, so that these may be heard for many miles around. Coal-black ravens and vultures flutter about. There is to be found the gate of hell, and whenever great battles are fought or there is bloody carnage somewhere on the globe, then there may be heard in the mountain fearful howlings, weeping and gnashing of teeth. This man was a physician, a professor, and a teacher. Let's not forget Christ's descent into hell after his crucifixion. Christ descended into the lower parts of the earth after his crucifixion. Jesus descended into the realm of the dead. The harrowing of hell, the descent of Christ into hell, is a triumphant descent of Christ into hell, or Hades, between the time of his crucifixion and his resurrection, when he brought salvation of the righteous who had died since the beginning of the world. Jesus Christ is renowned for healing people and spirits, and he teaches spirit release throughout the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke and John. Another consequence of Christ's descent into hell is that there was a seeding of something. A new generative power was implanted in the depths of the earth. This is expressed in the term, the harrowing of hell. Etheric mirroring. It's important to understand the mechanisms of our three bodies, which will also explain many experiences from a large amount of spiritual paranormal phenomenon. Emil Segui, doppelganger. The case history gives a good example of etheric mirroring, using of our etheric body, and explains how our etheric body, which is part material, may be seen and touched. The latter is very important, as spirits may use individuals' etheric substance for their own advantage. A limited number of people, such as Emil Segui, experience paranormal phenomena which sometimes breaches our physical-spiritual divide. Being ordinary people living within a conventional and socially accepted lifestyle, sometimes having no knowledge, interest or belief in spiritual or paranormal experiences. Emil Segui and some of the students who witnessed her paranormal experiences are fortunately documented over the 16 years of her transition through 18 different teaching placements, and on one occasion a double was witnessed by approximately 40 students. A lot of the experiences surrounding Emil Segui, which were witnessed, would have been unrecorded, as in 1845 the Witchcraft Acts of 1735 remained in force in Britain well into the 20th century. Emil Segui was a good teacher, too good to be dismissed, taking into consideration that a reasonable case for dismissal could not reflect the acceptance of the unacceptable, such as paranormal phenomena. Thus her transference through 18 different teaching placements as the pupils' parents complained in regards to this paranormal activity. The doppelganger precisely copied the teacher's every move as she wrote, except that it did not hold any implements such as a blackboard, chalk or eating utensils. It would be difficult for the etheric body to hold uncontaminated material objects, being transient, seldom used, whereas Emil Segui's clothes or jewellery would likely be charged with her ectoplasm, so manifest and be seen. If she had repeatedly used the same eating utensils for a long period of time, then they are likely to have been included in the mirroring. This is how psychometry works, by holding a part of another person's etheric substance and reading its imprint. The doppelganger did not always echo her movements. On several occasions, Segui would be seen in one part of the school when it was known that she was in another at that time. The latter gives reference to the etheric mirroring involving astral projection. Emile was thinking how she would rather be in the sewing class with her students. The latter represented an example of etheric mirroring, projecting the etheric body, providing an image from its spiritual material counterparts, telekinesis, or something sometimes called poltergeist activity, as the etheric substance can touch and affect the material dimension. After all, it is part of the material dimension. If an individual is disturbed in a certain way, it may affect their surrounding environment. It's not always a ghost. The image seen is a photographic video with no individual cognition. The ghost sits or mimics, mirroring its counterpart, similar to moving characters in a computer game. So here we have an example of how a living, incarnate person can project a ghost image reflection via mirroring. In the same way, an etheric, innate substance may provide recorded images which are simply photos, videos from the past. There are many accounts of mirroring from living people. Earthbound spirit will often use a person's ectoplasm, substance of the etheric body, to manifest materially. The latter is often invoked by material mediums, often initiating a group collective ectoplasm. It felt ethereal like cloth, a spider's web, not forgetting unwanted attention from earthbound spirit attachments in possession of a suitable host. Sagi said that whenever it was said to appear, she felt drained and fatigued. Her physical colour seemed to pale at these times, yet this extreme fatigue is also recognised by material mediums and my own clients' experiences of ethereal attachment or possession. The etheric body which was touched by Emile's students is also used by spirit via attachment possession for stroking, scratching and ethereal electrical disturbances of the host, to name but a few negative invasions. Sister Faustina's vision of hell. Sister Faustina, the Polish nun who received many revelations from Christ concerning his divine mercy, was shown hell so that people would repent and turn to her for forgiveness. In paragraph 741 of her now famous Diary of Saint Faustina, she recounts the reason our Lord had an angel escort her into hell. I am writing this at the command of God so that no soul may find an excuse by saying there is no hell or that nobody has ever been there, and so no one can say they don't know what it is like. She then describes the various torments she saw by the souls she had said had made a common mistake. I notice one thing, writes Saint Faustina, that most of the souls there are those who disbelieve that there is a hell. What the Polish nun saw when she visited hell were two categories of punishments, those suffered collectively by all, and those particular sufferings endured specifically by certain individuals. Concerning seven general torments suffered by all, she relates: 1. The loss of God. 2. The perpetual remorse of conscience. 3. One's condition will never change. 4. Fire that penetrates the soul without destroying it. 5. Continual darkness, a suffocating smell, and the sight of others there. 6. The constant company of Satan. 7. Horrible despair and hatred of God, vile words, curses and blasphemies. In addition to the general torment suffered by all in hell, Saint Faustina further saw particular sufferings there. There are special tortures destinated for particular souls. These are torments of the senses. Each soul undergoes terrible and indescribable sufferings related to the manner in which the person has sinned. Fall of Eden, the original contamination, Satan and the forbidden gospels. Love and light, everyone. Thank you for being here today and sharing our messages. This film is about Adam and Eve, the original contamination, and the forbidden gospels. I'll show some, if not most, of the suppressed gospels at the end of this film, before including another short film called The Kola Superdeep Borehole and Hell Explained, which I hope will explain some of the experiences from hell which have been experienced by some renowned people. There's nothing dogmatic about this film. It's simply my interpretation of the original contamination. Many religions will disagree with my opinion and interpretation, but at least today I'll not be burned, tortured, or have to bury my scripts. Our human history has been edited by men. For instance, in the Catholic Bible we have the Book of Tobit, which is omitted from the Protestant version of the Bible. Unfortunately, our religion's history is filled with dogmatic persecution and genocide, which continues to this day. Confusion arises as most religions don't accept the spiritual dimension. They teach that we die and are judged and then go to heaven or hell. Remember that Jesus released spirits all through his Gospels and even told his disciples not to stop others from releasing spirit if in God's name. Let's start at the beginning with the original contamination, as many people seem confused basically as to why, if there is a God who is all-powerful, then why is there and why has there been so much suffering in our world? I'll begin with a short story which may bring an empathy and congruence of the problematic situation God faced. Here's a short story. A parent who is high-ranking in society adopted 2 children from different families and develops a school for the children. It's a good school, but as always, there are some problems. The parent who made the new school tells his own children, being a girl and a boy called Adam and Eve, not to become involved with any bad children in the school. The parent is wise and knows what is good and what is bad, and this is explained to the children, but the children have freedom of choice. Now, imagine you can see into the future. You can see your children mixing with what you consider to be bad apples, bad people. Your children are groomed, coerced and possessed by the children in the school whom you consider to be a bad influence. Your children go to parties, take drugs and have indiscriminate sex, and they give birth to children born within this bad influence. The apples they have tasted have seeds which unfortunately are given to your son and accepted by your daughter through the sweetness of temptation. Your children are coerced and have both mated with people who are frivolous and participate in debauchery, saying things like, "Don't listen to your parents, they just want you not to have any fun." Would you take away your child's free will? Would you stop them from playing in the game of life and going to this school? God decided not to take away our freedom of choice. In a way, our Creator would be admitting defeat by a reversal of his or her own actions. Our Creator wanted us to have our freedom of choice. We decided to dive into the ocean as deep as we could, and that was fun. Then the problems began when we realised we needed to resurface. God may be omnipotent, having unlimited power, but like everything and everyone else is subjective to an extent to the tree of life and the freedom of choice from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, even though God created them, just like the parent, the teacher who made the school. And yet they still have to follow its given rules. It's about being subjective regarding an objective. Even if you have created it yourself, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil are both spiritual matrices. Similar to computers, they are entities, programs. It's like when we're in water. Maybe we could call this the curl of water, just like the tree of life. The water is an objective and we are subjective, affected by its conditions. Most of us know what a belly flop feels like, and that there is a less painful way to dive into the dimension of water. Many of us know what it feels like to have choked after breathing in water. And the unsinkable Titanic, named after the gods, was destroyed by mistakes made in the ocean of life. This is karma, preset conditions, just like a computer. It's an entity. An entity doesn't think or reason. The tree of life doesn't think or reason. It's a matrix, a computer. Every action has a reaction. We can become an adversary and fight the rules as we often do. We can go anywhere in the maze, but we cannot leave the maze. But if we comply with its precepts, the ocean can become a beautiful place to share, not forgetting that we would die without water. Now, let's see how Adam and Eve brought legions to wars and fill in some of the gaps left in the Bible. Let's look in between the lines. Genesis. Earth was created in 7 days. Each day was a generation. Now, generation applied to a specific period of time could be thousands of years. There's no time in spirit. So to simplify, we are told 7 days. Please watch my film, if you have time, Distortion, Tachypsychia. Adam and Eve experienced 2 births. The first birth was from God, and the second was from Satan, the adversary. With the first incarnation, which was into spirit before the fall, Adam and Eve were created from the reflection of God into Eden. God being male and female. In spirit, Adam and Eve were each male and female. They were incapable of and could not mate at this time. They had never experienced materiality at this time. They were reflected from the Spirit of God. From their existence in the spiritual dimension, they became part physical from the dust of the earth, being a spirit within an etheric body, not as a human body. Not as a human body incarnates on earth. Adam and Eve at this time experience earth from the spiritual dimension. They are not incarnated within a physical body. Please watch my film if you have time. Our three bodies, the material, spiritual and etheric bodies. Heaven on earth without being subjected to materiality. Adam and Eve could see the angels and also share earthly feelings with no material needs. No killing of anything took place, and at this stage there were earth-bound spirits which could also see the heavens. The earth they shared was a heavenly paradise. The Watchers, 200 angels working with God. The first greed, the Watchers desire material substance for pleasure. They cannot understand why they are denied material incarnation. They want to taste the fruits of material life. The fallen angels become angry and make war with God. The first greed is centered, fixated onto and into earth. They desire sexual pleasure and decide to steal it. They become incarnate on earth and become active in the game of life. The tree of life taking materiality, which is represented by the apple. Lucifer became so impressed with his own beauty, intelligence, power and position that he began to desire for himself the honour and glory that belonged to God alone. This pride represents the actual beginning of sin in the universe, preceding the fall of Adam and Eve. The book of Job tells us at that time Satan still had access to heaven and to the throne of God. One day the angels came to present themselves before God, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Job 1:6-7. At that time, Satan was still moving freely between the heaven and earth as Lucifer, speaking to God directly and answering for his activities. Satan, meaning adversary, becomes Pan, the goat-foot god. The fallen angels possess and mate with animals and kill and eat them. The initial contamination and evil indoctrination of earth takes place. The innocence and beauty of earth is defiled, and grotesque creatures are created by Pan and his followers, by mating with animals to induce a metamorphic incarnation. These are the first group of Nephilim. War depicts a problem, that God had a problem. Evil wars with God are reflected through our wars on earth being indoctrinated through possession. And karmic reactions come from the tree of life and are joining with materiality through the cloning of the fallen angels. God is subjective to the tree of life which he created. In the same way, we are subjective to what we create. Remember the story of the parental school. The fallen angels manifest into materiality on earth, cast down, fallen into purgatory, the prison of materiality. Lucifer, the morning star, bringing light, becomes Satan, the adversary and avenger, the nemesis of God and humanity. By his fall, Lucifer roams the earth, seeking to destroy God's creation. Satan incarnate becomes Pan, the goat-foot god, part animal. Through the possession of animals, spiritual material and etheric bodies, the fallen angels incarnate on earth. Metamorphosis takes place. Fallen angels manifest on earth, part animal and part alien. An abomination to God, the first 200 fallen angels, demons exist before they become legions. The leaders are Pan, Bacchus and Lilith. They travel through intoxication, drugs, sex and debauchery. Propagation through copulation. Pan is hermaphrodite, Bacchus is male and Lilith is female. Pan and Bacchus are part animal, goat-footed, horned gods. From propagating with animals and taking their lives and eating them, killing and suffering begins to defile and steal God's creation. The first contamination is completed. Serpents around Bacchus, Pan and Lilith, the serpent horn-headed gods of wine, ecstasy, debauchery and madness. Now we come to the second birth of Adam and Eve into materiality. Propagation and the first spirit possession. Spirit possession through the spirit and etheric bodies of Adam and Eve. Human metamorphosis into material incarnation. Metamorphotic incarnation takes place. Physical copulation through the etheric, which is part material body of Adam and Eve. Copulation invoking materiality and incarnation onto earth. The apple from the tree of life, earthly temptations, the seed from the tree, copulation, creation, we become demigods with the ability to give life through our creations. Our children are from the tree of life, which we were told not to touch. The curse of karma is inevitable. The firstborn Cain is cloned by evil. Contamination prevails. Fallen angels Pan, Bacchus and Lilith seduce Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are groomed, seduced and given knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve are seduced into materiality. They taste the fruits which contain the seeds of life, copulation. Adam and Eve manifest into material incarnation, from hermaphrodite, male and female, into the division of material, singular, being a man and a woman. Eve is pregnant with Cain when she falls to earth and is incarnated. God's exorcism and rebirth into materiality of Adam and Eve after their fall into incarnation. God removes the possession of Lilith and Pan and clones and gives security to Adam and Eve by use of a rib, being DNA which we now know came into woman from man. We know this through genetics. Humans have now adopted the nature of evil and conflict, their new nature being bred into them from the fallen angels. But God's transference of DNA, the rib, gives an amount of molecular protection to humans against physical deformity and the propagation by the adversary. Cain is born from the first contamination. He's born on earth. And from Cain, the second group of Nephilim are born. part human and part animal from the breeding with fallen angels. Cain and deformed humans, many being giants, are born. The contaminated earth becomes the battlefield where the war between God and evil continues. Purgatory. Adam and Eve's manifestation into material incarnation as man and woman from hermaphrodite, each being now male and female. Originally no gender indifference or significance. Remember, God is male and female. Adam and Eve are indoctrinated into sexual divisions, now becoming a man and a woman. Lilith possesses Eve, and Pan's copulation completes the metamorphosis into materiality. It was Adam and Eve who were both seduced and used sexually, not just Eve, which has been propagated by men, indoctrinating the repression of women. Adam and Eve are incarnated onto earth physically, and Eve is pregnant with the child from Lilith and Pan, whom we now know was named Cain. After God's exorcism and purification of Adam and Eve via the rib, Adam and Eve have a child of their own, and this child is called Abel. Eventually Cain kills Abel, and conflict begins between two tribes, one being the evil Canaanites. The second group of Nephilim giants are born, and the self-destruction of nature and humanity is inbred. Cloned contamination and the initiation through karma of purgatory. War, killing, greed, eating of flesh, including human. Eventually the flood kills the Nephilim, and many arks are constructed for protection by people. The arks are not all boats. Ark, chest, confined safe place. Hundreds of arks, stone buildings are built and have been constructed with vitrified joints. The arks are sealed by their stone joints being melted together. This would be to seal against water, and the technology used cannot be reproduced in our present time. God told us how to build the arks. God has always been with us and is there for us now. Purgatory is from where we can decide which path to follow. We can live for money and materiality, or follow and return into the Spirit of God. Infernum, hell, is a magnetic consolidating from greed, possession and solidification through the fire of purgatory into the frozen solidification of ice. Messages of resurrection from our Saviour, God's indoctrination amidst contamination, crucifixion and sacrifice after the crucifixion. Jesus travels into hell during the 3 days dissipation of the etheric body and releases spirits into the light who have been trapped by evil and should not be in hell. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus teaches and releases spirit. He tells his disciples not to stop people releasing unclean spirit in God's name. God is still at war. The problem still exists, but God is still with us. God forgives us and offers us options to change our nature from the original contamination. The chances we are given are within the tree of life, and like a computer, we can become a part of evil, a virus, or work our way back out of purgatory. The removal of the original contamination by cloning. is a 3-part cloning through what people call the autistic spectrum: Tourette's, autism and Asperger's spectrum syndrome, being an alien molecular metamorphosis to change the nature of our species through possession and reincarnation from the first indoctrination. Possession, Tourette syndrome, you may observe the anomaly fighting like a trapped bird in a cage. Integration through the second stage, autism, of the autism spectrum, and the third stage, integration through the Asperger spectrum syndrome. Now, if you remain with me a few more minutes, I'll conclude with another short story. The Tale of the Frog and the Scorpion. A changing of the nature of a species. There's a forest fire, and a scorpion asks the frog to carry it across the river. The frog hesitates, afraid of being stung. But the scorpion argues that if it did so, they would both drown. Considering this, the frog agrees, but midway across the river, the scorpion decides to sting the frog, dooming them both to death. The frog asks the scorpion, "Why did you do this?" The scorpion replies that it was in my nature to do so. Autism, to change the nature of a self-destructive species. From 2021, 10 years ago, there's 1 in 1,000 autistic. 5 years ago, 1 in 500. Now, 1 in 50, and increasing each year. Star children, the new generation, metamorphoses, the rainbow spectrum. What began with possession ends with possession. And the wise old scientists looked out over the earth and saw all was not well. Swarms of aggressive wild locusts plagued the planet, devouring everything, including themselves, in a frenzy of greed, for such was the nature of a species. The elder was so sad, and he knew that something had to be done or the world would be destroyed. In another place, far away and hidden from the world, the wise old elder found another species of locust that was completely different. These locusts were of a completely different nature. They rested by the water, ate little food, and they seemed to be a fragile species who liked to be left alone within peace and solitude. The wise old elder collected some of the wild locusts and placed them in a large observation area, and with them he included several of the peaceful locusts. Some of the aggressive locusts attacked the ones which were different, and some of the peaceful ones found it hard to accept the wild locusts. But some aggressive locusts seemed to like and accept the peaceful strain and protected and accepted them into the community. As time passed, the elder noticed certain changes taking place within the group dynamics. Some of the newborn locusts were affected in some ways and were making jerking, aggressive movements. The scientists believe that this was the first adaptation phase of the metamorphosis in relation to the integration of the new species. The elder noticed that as more time passed, the second group of newly born young locusts bore different characteristics to the others. Being of a more peaceful nature, they seemed to be quiet and easily agitated by any interference from the other locusts. After a long time, a third group of locusts emerged which were not aggressive, greedy or self-destructive. A new species. This was a result of the integration of the previous two. The elder placed a new species he had developed into a confined environment, and the metamorphosis of the two different species resulted in a locust with a different nature that would be able to survive within its world. The wise elder collected the passive locusts and mixed them with the aggressive species. Soon there was one within 100 of the new species developing, and the elder smiled. Although this change was stressful for the species, the final result would benefit the world. Love and light, and thank you for sharing, my friend. I'm working on more films, so please subscribe to make them available for yourself. Thank you.